Hi, everyone.
Hello again. We're in Genesis chapter 39 now. Back to the story of Joseph after a detour into the life and descent of the family of Judah.
Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. So it was, from the time that he had made him overseer of the house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know that he had what he had except for the bread which he ate.
So before we get to the main point which is made here, I think there's a sidebar point in verse 1, which is, we've already made the point that Joseph is betrayed by his brethren, literal brethren, his
Own brothers.
Sons of the same father. But he's also been betrayed here by Ishmaelites. They're the ones who profit from selling him to the Egyptians, and they're cousins and second cousins, because the Ishmaelites only go back 2 generations to Abraham again.
Yeah, right.
So one of the side points that's being made over and over again is here, you can't trust those that are closest to you. And Joseph no doubt felt betrayed by his own family. And yet the point is made, the central point here is that he found favor in his sight and attended him, so that the Lord was with him.
Yeah.
The very fact that he found favor with Potiphar is a sign that the Lord is with him and wants to reaffirm his commitment to Joseph and his righteousness.
So even though it looks like God is, from a perspective, you'd think God had abandoned him, but he hadn't abandoned him. He was with him, it says. And his master can see that God is with him. So even though the outward signs are all negative, something good is happening from this, and people are seeing the difference between what they put trust in and what Joseph puts trust in, that God is with him and blessing him.
They're also saying that his faith is in a God who is different than their gods. This God that he believes in now is a God that goes across borders. Now, the ancient world, the polytheistic world of that day, gods had territories, and gods had those that they protected, but they lived within their boundaries, and then they, of course, if you moved from one place to another, you served a different god. This is obviously not the case here, and this is 3,800 years ago.
It's still
something new in the world, which is the God of Israel is bigger than the gods of polytheism and the gods of Egypt.
Yeah, and it's still a lesson we need to learn, not to limit God, not to set rules upon him as to who he can bless and who he can't. He's not only blessing Joseph, he's blessing this Egyptian and his household.
Now, this, we need to note, is the beginning of the fulfillment of Genesis 12:3. The 7th promise of the Abrahamic covenant was that through his seed, Abraham's seed, all the nations, all of the families of the nations would be blessed.
Yeah.
And here we have the beginning of the fulfillment of that promise, which was iterated to Abram and then reiterated to Isaac his son and to Jacob his grandson, and now is starting to be fulfilled in a major way, in that God is going to save the Egyptians and the Israelites, the tiny nation of Israel that's already starting to take shape. At this point, only 70 or so people, but they're all going to be saved, and their lives are going to be blessed by means of Joseph. But can he see that at the time?
No.
And could Jacob and his brethren see anything like what the shape of the future would be? And it's all It's all going to take shape within their lifetime.
Yeah,
So
so I think what we can take from that is no matter what your situation is, put your trust in God and follow through with what you should be doing. God will be with you. It doesn't mean your circumstances will necessarily change.
Yeah.
But you behave the way you should behave, and that is a witness to other people.
Sure was. Joseph was different. They could all see that.
Yeah.
And here's what James Strahan has to say about this. This is a wonderful book on Genesis called Hebrew Ideals in Genesis by James Strahan. That's Strahan. He says, the story of Joseph's life in Egypt begins with the quiet statement that the Lord was with him, repeated 3 times. That is in verses 3:21 and 23. It was sometimes said among the Hebrews that Yahweh's presence was confined to the land of Canaan, to the streams and hills and groves of the country of their birth, while he left other territories to be ruled by other gods, so that when any of his people crossed the border, they were beyond his reach and care. This was a popular notion, which the writers of Genesis nowhere countenance. So what Strahan doesn't stress here, since this book was written about 100 years ago, is that that idea is very much alive. And it's usually used by unbelievers to criticize the Bible and to say, well, some of them believed in this God of, this limited God and territory, and that Yahweh was a local Canaanite God. No. This idea, Strahan says, is not countenanced at all in Genesis. They say that the Lord was with Jacob in Syria and with Joseph in Egypt, and that in these lands the same God directed the minds of such men as Laban and Pharaoh. He was Joseph's guardian in his exile. That's right. So we've already seen him touch Laban, despite Laban's self-interest. Laban has been used to bless Jacob and the family. And so now Pharaoh is going to be used.
It's giving you a true history of the way people thought, but it's also breaking free from that thought.
Yeah.
This is not the God of the universe.
No.
He's not limited or restricted.
We've got a link that's on that very subject. That this episode all by itself would make this point very strongly, but even the very first page of Genesis makes the point even more strongly. That we did a video on this, not based on our own wisdom, but based upon the Genesis commentaries that all make the same point. What is Genesis 1 about? It's exploding polytheism, pantheism, and five other worldviews, all in one chapter.
I remember that being a kind of light bulb moment for me, I guess, is the reason that Moses is writing Genesis and telling the stories of Egypt, and he's breaking down. He's showing God's judgment on all these false ideas.
Yep.
Through the history.
So I would never have guessed, because I didn't read commentaries in those days. The Genesis 1 is not about. It's not supposed to be a scientific history of the world, nor is it telling us how long we've been on the planet, like a lot of conservatives believe. Yeah. Its main point is to explode polytheism, but in doing so, it explodes 6 other worldviews.
Yeah.
So that point was expanded in this video, based on commentaries that we had read at that time,
and
some 20 years ago.
Put the Genesis playlist up again.
Yeah, so that video that's on your screen is actually number 17 in the Genesis playlist, which is now over 100 videos.
Wow.
See you next time.